Beach, and I'm an alcoholic. How you doing? Can you hear all right in the back? Good. That's a good sound system. Well, I want to repeat what I said last week, and that is that we're here tonight to have fun, and we're just going to sit back and tell some AA yarns and stories. And anytime during the meeting you want to go get some coffee or go to the bathroom, just go ahead. That's no problem. I enjoy doing this. I've been in AA a long time, and this is just my favorite thing to talk about is how wonderful AA is. And sometimes we don't get to hear that often enough. And we just kind of chugging along and not realizing that we have stumbled onto the greatest organization in the world, and that we are indeed lucky people. And last week I was talking about a point that I think my friend Clancy makes, which is that AA only gets about 10% of the alcoholics. 90% of alcoholics die drunk. And he runs a mission out in California. 500 or 600 people stay there, a men's mission. And they're hopeless alcoholics living on the street, and he tries to talk a lot of them into coming into AA. And the reason they don't is that they're different than the people in AA. And they wished that they were regular alcoholics so they could join AA. But unfortunately, my case is different. And so I'm left out here to wither on the vine. And that is the defining thing, is that for some unknown reason, we were able, at some point in time, maybe if somebody had approached us earlier or later, we wouldn't have heard it. But somehow we were able to make the connection that this indeed was for us. And so we were very lucky to get in the door. And I don't know about you, but even after getting sober and getting in the meetings, I found that I had more than one identity. And sometimes we hear it at meetings, I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, I'm an alcoholic and overeater, I'm an alcoholic and. And even if you're not saying it, sometimes we're thinking it. We just have an obsession with something that makes us different from other people. And this can be a big hindrance to happy sobriety. And I was thinking about an example would be if we had an imaginary AA meeting where the usher at the door could read minds. And so you didn't have to tell them anything. You just came in, and whatever you were thinking, that's what he or she was able to pick up on. And so we're at this imaginary AA meeting, and the first guy comes in, and the usher is over there going, "Hey, how you doing?" He said, "Fine. I'm Joe, and I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict." He said, "Great, hey, glad you're here. Come on up in the front. The first 3 rows on the left. That's for you." The next guy comes in, and he says, "Hey, I'm Frank, and I'm a drug addict and alcoholic." He said, "Oh, yeah, glad to have you here. You're up in the first 3 rows on the left, up on the front." And the next person that came in says, "Hi, I'm Harry, and I'm gay." "Oh, great, glad to have you here. You're in the first 3 rows up on the right, up in the front." And the next guy came in, and he says, "My name's Ernest. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm definitely not gay." He said, "Fine, you're in the first 3 rows up in the front." And the next guy comes in, he says, "I'm Harry, I'm an alcoholic, I hate white guys." "Oh, good, glad to have you here tonight. You're in the section over by the coffee pot, see those 7 rows over there?" Yeah. Next guy comes in, "Hi, I'm Marvin, I hate black guys." "Oh, good to have you here, Marvin. Now, you're right over by the coffee pot, those 6 rows that are right over there." Next guy that comes in says, "Hi, I'm Harold. I'm an alcoholic and an overeater." "No shit." "Well, Harold, you sit, go down the center aisle, sit on any seat on the aisle. And that way, when you keep going back for the cookies, you won't be stepping all over everybody." Next person comes in. "Hey, how you doing?" "Hey, good to see you. My name's Vivian. And I'm an alcoholic and a woman who has been abused and disrespected and disadvantaged and discriminated against by white male chauvinists for over 300 years. Well, Vivian, welcome here. We got a wonderful spot for you over by the literature table. There's about 4 rows over there, and just make yourself comfortable. Next guy comes in. Hey, how you doing? Hi, my name's Red Neck. I'm an alcoholic and a victim of total discrimination against big, intimidating, tattooed guys who ride loud motorcycles. And my motorcycle has a place for a gun rack, my dog, and my woman in that order. Well, Red, it's great to have you here. There's some seats over by the literature table. As a matter of fact, you see that tall woman getting to sit down over there. See, who haven't I offended? I got to keep going here. Next lady comes in. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, my name's Eileen, and my breasts are too small. Oh. Well, Eileen, it's wonderful to have you here. She said, I'm an alcoholic. My breasts are too small. Why don't you have a seat over by the literature table? As a matter of fact, if you want to sit behind the books, that'll be all right. So the guy comes in. He says, my name's Richard. I'm an alcoholic. My penis isn't big enough. Well, Richard, it's good to have you here. It's wonderful, but you're not going to be in this room. You got to go downstairs. You came up the stairs, go downstairs. When you get to the hallway down there, turn left. The hallway leads into the main school auditorium. And it's a little late. I doubt if you'll find a seat in there. You'll probably have to stand. And finally, somebody was walking in. Our usher reads his or her mind. And this person says, I'm Joe, I'm Mary, and I'm an alcoholic. And the usher's waiting, and there's nothing else. He said, an alcoholic? What do you mean by that? Well, what I mean is that I'm different from most other people on this planet. I never have fit in anywhere. I'm always a nervous wreck, and I resent the fact that I'm a nervous wreck, and I resent how unfair life has been, and I resent the fact I can't fit in. I don't fit in anywhere. I don't connect with anybody. Life has just always been a struggle. It's awful. It's terrible. I have trouble sleeping. I isolate. And alcohol came along and fixed all that. And it was great. But then alcohol turned on me, and I found out if I keep drinking, I'm going to die. So now I'm left being sober with all of this. And the usher said, welcome to AA. Let me give you a big book, because in this book is the absolute solution to that problem that you just described. If you have that problem, there is unbelievable hope for you. You're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. You are going to have, in a spiritual way, you're going to have things. You are the luckiest person in the world. Here's a book. We're delighted to have you here. And the guy goes, God, I just feel great. That's wonderful. By the way, where do I sit? Anywhere you want. You sit anywhere you want. And so I think what I'm saying is that we could all go back out the door and redefine ourselves so that we can sit anywhere we want and have a problem that this program is tailor-made to meet. Because anytime I tell myself that I have sexual this, or I have an appetite, or I have this, without realizing it, I'm telling myself that maybe these steps might work on that. I know they work on just an alcoholic, but maybe they wouldn't work on everything else. And it makes it harder to grasp everything with the 100% enthusiasm that we can when we realize that as alcoholics we have all kinds of problems, but until we sober up and work the steps and allow God to do His unbelievable transformations, we don't really know what will be left. And after a couple of years, we may find that we've had a wonderful transformation, and we still want to go get a little therapy on some little area. Wonderful. But before we do all this, we've got 5 million areas and the program is going to transform almost all of them. And so it's a way of, that for me, I like to just get back to, I have a problem, as the second step says, if, in the 12 and 12. No, in the big book. If, when you try to stop, you can't, and if, thanks, Dan, whenever you drink, you get all messed up, you may have an illness which only a spiritual experience can fix. Now, what a strange disease to have. I have a disease that only a spiritual experience can fix. And if I can understand that that's what I have, then I can be totally committed to getting into this wonderful program. Now, we also talked about the Washingtonians last time, which gave us a background about how important it is to stick to our primary purpose and to stick to our traditions here in AA. And as I go through these, I'm going to tell little stories about the fellowship and then go back into the steps. And when I think about Alcoholics Anonymous, I see in everybody, when you read the history or you just really think about it, you see God's handiwork all throughout the formation of this fellowship. And I would say that the real beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous started probably around 1915 in a little town in Vermont called Manchester. And in that town was being assembled a cast of characters that were going to play absolutely essential roles in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the first one is one that we're very familiar with, who was Bill Wilson, because he lived nearby in East Dorset, and he was attending Manchester Academy and was there as a teenager and got to meet and mingle with the other characters who were playing the essential role in starting Alcoholics Anonymous. And the second character was over from Albany, New York, was Ebby Thatcher. And his father was the mayor of Albany. And if you go to Albany, there's a big square or park in the middle, Thatcher Park. And at the time, he was being considered for vice president in one of the campaigns. And he had this alcoholic son named Ebby, who he didn't know what to do with. And they eventually, as you'll hear later on in the history, just said, we'll make a deal with you, Ebby. You live in the summer home in Manchester, and we'll support you. But please don't ever come around the family. And so Bill meets Ebby, and they did some drinking together, and so they are forming this friendship. And then up from Rhode Island is a very wealthy millionaire family, the Hazard family, a very prominent businessman in Rhode Island who wanted his son, Roland, to take over the business. But he was also an alcoholic and was an acquaintance of Bill and Ebby in Manchester, where they had a summer home. And the last of the ones was the Dr. Burnham came up from Brooklyn, New York, and his beautiful daughter Lois, who was to go on and found Al-Anon, was there summering with her family and met Bill Wilson and later fell in love and they got married. And so here we have these four teenagers who are somehow having their paths cross in there that are going to start this whole thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. And the first one to bite the dust was Roland Hazard. And he had just almost died of alcoholism 2 or 3 times, and so his father decided that he would spend whatever money it took to get his son sober. And so they tried everything. Any hospital in the United States that had any kind of a program, he'd send him there. And no success. And after a couple of years of this, someone suggested that Carl Jung in Switzerland was the only chance that his son had. And so Mr. Hazard sent Roland over to Carl Jung for a year. And he stayed in Switzerland having therapy, discussing his alcoholism, and as Jung later wrote, Jung was trying to cause a massive personality transformation, which we call spiritual awakening, because he was well aware that that was the only thing that could save an alcoholic, was that type of a massive personality transformation. And he worked with him for a year, and at the end of the time he said, that's it, that's about everything that I can do for you. You understand your situation. If you go back to drinking, your only future is death or to be locked up. And Roland said, yep, I got it. I'm going back to the United States and get with my father. And he got as far as Paris, and someone asked him the wrong question. They said, would you like a drink? And he said, yes, that would be lovely. And all of a sudden he's totally drunk and doesn't go back to the United States. After he gets off the drunk, he feels so terrible, he goes back to Dr. Young. And here we have the beginning of what Joe just read. No human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And when Roland Hazard went back to Dr. Young, he said, oh, geez, I got there and now I got drunk and I'm, so what do we do? And Dr. Young, who at that time was possibly the world's greatest psychiatrist, said, there's nothing I can do for you. No human power could have relieved our alcoholism. So here was symbolically the maximization of human power, and it was saying to the disease of alcoholism, there's nothing I can do for you, which did a tremendous favor for Roland, because it made him as open-minded as the dying can become. Because he suddenly was unable to tell himself, well, there's some other place I can go, there's some other place, and he just went, whoa, there's nothing that can be done for you. It's almost like, if I was you, I'd go home and fill out your will. I mean, it was heavy duty. And then Dr. Young said, however, I have read about cases like yours where people have gone and found a way of having a spiritual experience or spiritual awakening, and they have been able to have a happy sobriety. If I was you, I would try and find something like that. And so Roland came back, and at the time in the United States was a very fashionable spiritual movement that was going on called the Oxford Movement, where groups of people who were fed up with the church and all the middleman and all the mixed messages they were getting were just meeting in each other's homes to talk about spiritual principles and try to become better citizens and better human beings. They weren't alcoholics, they were just regular people who wanted to be better people. And this was very popular, and there were little groups all over the place. And Roland found his way into one of those groups, and it worked. And he just had this great new awakening. He stopped drinking, and he just had this happy sense about him. And it turned out that a group of them went to Manchester to a different summer home where they were like a halfway house, and they were engaged in helping people who were on the down and out, not alcoholics, but just people who needed help. And they were working up there when the second in the chain of events took place, which was Ebby. Ebby was the town drunk, and he had been arrested numerous times. Once for driving his car while drunk into a farmhouse through the living room, came to a stop in the kitchen, and the farmer's wife was in there, and he just calmly asked for a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? While sitting in his car, and of course they got arrested, and they were really all upset with Ebby, and when's this going to stop, and we can't have him living in our community, and the stuff that was going on, and he's just drinking and drinking. And the last time he got arrested, he had decided that he's got to get his act together. How many of us have done that? You're sitting around drinking and you realize, I got to get my act together. And so he looked at this summer house that he was living in, and it looked awful. And he said, what this house needs is a coat of paint. So he went out and bought some booze and some paint and came back and started painting the house. And he painted and painted and painted and painted and painted. And he got 4 or 5 square feet done. And went over and sat down with a drink to, oh man, look how great that looks compared to the house. Just sat there enjoying this 8 square feet or 4 square feet of painting when some birds flew over and crapped on the paint where he had just painted. So he went in and got a couple shotguns and sat out in the front yard drinking and guarding his fresh paint that he had just done. And any bird that went by got blasted with the shotgun. And the people are hearing all this shooting and all that. And they call the police, and he's in, and the judge is getting serious. And he said, you've been in here enough times. I got to do some heavy-duty stuff with you. And he said, can I make a phone call? I said, oh, yeah, you can make a phone call. And he called Roland Hazard, who he knew, and he knew that he might help him out. And when Roland came over and saw the situation, he said, man, this is perfect. He said to the judge, would you release him in my recognizance? I will take total responsibility. The judge said, hey, the Hazard family wants to take responsibility for this guy. Okay. So he releases Ebby and off to the Oxford movement. And guess what? Ebby gets sober. And he's doing great. He's having a wonderful time, and they get transferred down to New York to work in Stoop Kitchen and to work with the Oxforders in New York City. And after a short period of time there, Ebby got to thinking about his old drinking buddy, Bill Wilson. He said, I wonder whatever happened to Bill. I wonder how he's doing. I ought to look him up because this program might be something he could use. And there came that phone call back in 1934 in the fall. And Bill got the phone call, and of course he was down and out. He'd been fired from all his Wall Street jobs and had been in and out of Towns Hospital. And Dr. Silkworth and his wife Lois had been having serious conversations about having him committed forever. I mean, that's where he was at that time. And Lois was working in a department store, and Bill was stealing money from her purse so that he could drink. Because he needed to have a drink so he could put a big deal together and bail him out. Because he was the hero, after all. This was just temporary that she was working and he was stealing money. That was just one of those aberrations, because he was really a wheeler dealer, and any second we're going to put a deal together. And he gets a phone call from Ebby, and he's all excited. Ebby, yeah, the last time we were together, we were all drunk in that plane, and we landed at the opening day of Manchester Airport. Only it was the day before, and it wasn't open, and there was a big to-do, and and the police came out to see what had happened, and they all fell out of the plane. The pilot was drunk, and it was a big stink. And Bill was like, yeah, man, wasn't that fun? We had the greatest time up at the airport, and here comes my old drinking buddy over, and I got a full bottle of gin. This is going to be a better Saturday than I thought. And Ebby walks in, and Bill immediately went into a state of shock because Ebby looked great. And it scared him, you know what I mean? He just looked totally healthy and sober, and he said, what's the matter, Ebby? The hell's wrong with you? And Ebby said, I found religion. And Bill's going, don't worry, we can get over that. Sit down. Tell me all about yourself. And Ebby just kept talking about God. And Bill's just going, man, Ebby, my buddy, what have they done to you? Here's a bottle of gin. Now let's get talking about that time we're in the air. And Ebby just kept talking about all this stuff. And Bill's going, I was brought up in the Christianity, and I don't believe in churches, and I don't believe in Christ. I don't have any of those. I just think this is crazy about that. And Ebby said, well, Bill, you could choose your own concept of God. Doesn't matter. You could still get out of this hellhole you're in. Oh, I don't think so. So Ebby went off, and Bill went on drinking and drinking. And after another few weeks, he ended back up in Towns Hospital. Absolute despair. Just sat there on the edge of the bed, talked to Dr. Silkworth, and they were talking about, this may be it, where we lock you up just for Lois's sake, just to keep you from killing yourself out there. And he's sitting on the bed, and he's thinking about what Ebby had said. And he just, for whatever reason, he just said, well, if there is a God, let him show himself to me now. And the room lit up, and Bill felt like he was lifted up on a mountaintop. He heard the winds blowing, and he felt the drink problem just lifted out of him. And it was the most wonderful feeling. And in later years, he called it his hot flash. But at that moment, it was just one of these magnificent things. Happens to some people, but it's very rare. But it did happen. And the most amazing part of this is, and this is where these psychiatrists come in, because we had Dr. Young playing such a critical role, and so did Dr. Silkworth, because Bill has this thing. And so the next morning, he can hardly wait to see Dr. Silkworth to tell him what happened on the bed last night. So now imagine yourself, you're a psychiatrist, you're running the place for drunks, and you come in, and one of the alcoholics said, Doc, you're not going to believe what happened to me on the bed last night. I was sitting in there, and all of a sudden God came in, and the lights and the mountain, and I'm sitting on top of the mountain, and the wind is blowing, and Doc, I'm never going to drink again. It was just wonderful what happened to me last night. And you can picture now, can't you picture a psychiatrist going, "Oh, that's great, Bill, that's great. Take 2 of these. We'll get you down off the mountaintop." But he didn't. He saw something in Bill, and he said, "I'm not sure what happened, but whatever it was, it's wonderful, and you should go with it." And so he gave the official permission, if you will, to believe in what happened. And Bill never had another drink till he died in January 1971, and that was in December of 1934. And he went on to get back in business and go out and meet Dr. Bob in Akron, which is a story for another day. But needless to say, as we will find out in subsequent installments, these 2 gentlemen, once they got together, both having been in the Oxford movement, put together a plan for alcoholics to stay sober by. And Bill had all kinds of highfalutin ideas of how this new organization should grow and how much money it was going to need and how many paid employees we were going to need and all these things that we'll talk about next week. But out of all of that, from the original 6 principles of the Oxford movement came our 12 steps. And that's what I wanted to just feed that in as we're talking about step 2 tonight. And these steps were evolved and borrowed from religions, from philosophies, and from the early experience of the fellowship itself. And as we said last week, right in the preface to the 12 and 12, these are a group of principles, group of spiritual principles that if you practice them as a way of life will get rid of the obsession to drink and enable you to become happily and usefully whole. That's what the steps are for. To become happily and usefully whole. To be complete. To be mental, physical, and spiritual. That package. And that's what we are as human beings. And so these principles were put together. They were adopted more or less by the fellowship, and they were eventually put down in writing in 1939, and we have been living by those ever since. And the power of this is what the power of AA is. It's not the power of the meetings or the power of anything else. It's the power of these steps to transform individuals so that the next individual who comes into the fellowship of AA can see it. That's what attracts the next person. You know, you can just sit next to somebody and they're happy and they're going like that, and you find out they got a lot of troubles that they're dealing with, and they're still, yeah, boy, life is wonderful, God's wonderful. You go, wow, what is that? And pretty soon you find yourself, no matter what group you've been going to, there's 2 or 3 people in there, and you want what they have. You know what I'm saying? You just go, God, I wish I had what they have. And what they have is spirituality. That's what happens. So these steps are set down, and we come in, and if we get a good sponsor, we're in a home group, we are going to be led through these steps, but we have to do them. There's no way, as we were talking last week, it won't rub off. What rubs off is the willingness to do the steps. That's what rubs off. And the doorway to all the steps, and I'll probably talk about this every week, is powerlessness. The whole foundation of a strong spiritual life, and how about that for a paradox? The strong foundation of a spiritual life is powerlessness. Wow, that sounds like going to build a house with a rock-hard foundation. What's that made out of? Powerlessness. Doesn't sound very strong, does it? But that's it. That's what will hold us solid. Because if we're powerless, we're going to always need a higher power. And if we always need a higher power, we're going to be fine. It's when we convince ourselves, well, actually, sometimes I need a higher power, but other times I like getting in there myself and sort of handle things on my own. Because that's the way I've always been. And I like to be in control, and I like this, and I like that, and pretty soon we're back not really needing a higher power. And so this powerlessness where we surrender into this program 100% is the ticket to a happy sobriety. It is the absolute ticket. And as we said last week, and our literature talks about it, people who have been sober for years are wondering why they don't have that great book that some of the other AA members have. And lo and behold, when they really go back and dig in, they find that they never really surrendered in the first step. They sort of gave it lip service. Yeah, I got a drinking problem, but I'm not powerless. Powerless means that unless something other than yourself comes into your life, you're going to die drunk. That's what powerless means. And as we talked last week, the powerlessness occurs when you're sober. The disease of alcoholism kills alcoholics when there's no alcohol in their system. And that's what we talked about last week. That the mere knowledge that you're an alcoholic will not keep you sober. All you have is a smart alcoholic. But we still have a drunk alcoholic, because just knowing that we're alcoholic. Because what we have is no defense against the first drink. That's what we have. That's what kills us. If our only problem, as I said last week, was whenever we drink we get all screwed up, that's not much of a problem, because all you do is don't drink and you're fine. But what do you say to an alcoholic? Hey, your problem is whenever you drink you get all screwed up. Just don't drink and you'll be fine. What would you say? You don't understand, man. When I don't drink, it's when I hurt. When I'm sober, that's when all the pain, I can feel it. You want me to stay in this much pain for the rest of my life? You got to be kidding. I need a break from all of this, and that's what drinking is. So to tell an alcoholic to just not drink is insane. And that's what AA does. Well, all you have to do is don't drink. But AA is offering us relief from all the pain we're in, and it's going to come as a result of working the steps and attending these meetings, and we find something is happening inside of us that's enabling us to be happy with not drinking. And if we don't get happy, it just isn't going to work. Because that means you're going to have to stay sober and miserable for the next 30 years. That's a pretty hard bill to fill. So that's why we want to work the steps so hard, to get this transformation so that we're walking around with none of the old problems that alcohol fixed. That's what sobriety is. It's not having problems that alcohol is supposed to fix. Sure, we have problems, but they're not the ones that we were talking about. Nobody likes me, I'm the only one, life doesn't make it. The ones I was talking about with the last alcoholic that came in the meeting, which is a description of this disease of alcoholism. So, if you're new, please look at that first step and really get gut-wrenching honest with yourself. And are you surrendering? Are you really powerless? And go back and really confront your drinking and look at it, and you'll probably see, yeah, the evidence is overwhelming that I'm powerless. I just don't want to be powerless. Because what are the implications if you are powerless over alcohol? You really have to do the rest of the steps. And you've already snuck a peek at some of them. And you don't want to be making that fearless moral inventory and sharing that with anybody else. And you don't want to be making amends to other people and going to see them. And you don't want prayer and meditation. You can barely sit alone on a train for 3 seconds. You know what I mean? So, this looks pretty intimidating. And so if you really weren't 100% powerless, then you can sort of just go to meetings, hang around, have coffee, talk a good game, and you wouldn't have to get into all of that. But we do, because this is how you win, is to give up. That's another paradox in sobriety, is that you win by surrendering in to this whole thing. And you no longer have to be in charge. So as we surrender, we're driven down. That's not a happy thing, to admit you're powerless over alcohol and your life's unmanageable. There aren't many people who take the first step and go, God, I feel so much better. Now that I admitted I'm powerless over it, it's like, what am I? I'm nothing. And, my life's unmanageable. It's just, blah. But we're ready now. We're totally open for the rest of the program. And look what they hit us with. Boom! Came to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore us to sanity. Couldn't you have kept the God part later and not hit me with it while I'm lying down here? I mean, you put me in this state of hopelessness, and now you're telling me the only thing that's going to get me out of there is God. Well, I'll tell you, I don't believe in God. I just don't. I'm sorry. Maybe some people do, but I don't. I'm different. I had this background. I had this. I had that. And then you read in the 12 and 12, and Bill divides us into 5 categories. The first guy or gal is their philosophy of living is threatened by the idea of a God. Well, I might as well not change your mind over that. Next one, intellectually self-sufficient. We are convinced that if we apply our willpower, that mankind can overcome anything, and boy, this is who we are. And then there's others who were filled with faith. We go to church every day, and we still reek of alcohol. And that can be. Or maybe we're ones who we had this tremendous faith as a child, and then, boom, it all disappeared, and we're convinced that none of that can ever happen. So what can occur to cause us to change our mind about this higher power? What could happen? Maybe we'll be at a meeting, and there'll be a knock at the door. And in comes this apparition. Ooh. And it says, "Hi, I'm God. I just wanted to help all of you that don't believe. See you later." Woo, and it goes down. That isn't happening. You know what I'm saying? This is not happening here in the program. So how are you going to change your mind? What is the, AA? You think they're going to convince you of the existence of God? AA doesn't have a God to convince you of. What AA is very good at is convincing you of the need for God. That's our specialty. Convince you that you need it. And, I used to be a flight instructor in the Marine Corps. And if I was still in there, I had a way that I would help people take the second step. And I'll take you on this flight right now, and then maybe it'll help you understand the second step. And what we'll do, we're going to strap into this hotshot jet, and we're going to take off and go up to about 50,000 feet, and I'm going to be talking to you about powerlessness. Do you understand powerlessness? It's essential if you're going to get this program that you understand powerlessness. And you go, yeah, I think I understand it. Well, let me give you a little help in understanding total powerlessness, okay? So we blow the canopy open, roll over, pull negative G's, and you go out. And now you're floating around out there. I can still talk to you with on the headset. And I said, you went out without your chute. Are you getting the feeling of powerlessness floating around? And you might be saying, yeah, I'm getting... And you're thinking, hey, he's probably going to maneuver that plane somehow back in, and I could fall into the cockpit or something. But I'm staying a half a mile away just talking to you about powerlessness. How's it feel? And if you're a real cool cat, you're going like this, Because 50,000 feet, 40, it takes minutes to come down, and you just, this thing's going to turn out somewhere. And But you get down around 3,000 feet, and you start seeing relative motion real good, and you can see the parking lot out in back here is coming up fast, real fast. And there's like a truck out there with your name on it, and you're just zeroed in, and about 8 feet from the truck, a big hand comes down out of the sky and just grabs you, and a voice, sort of a cosmic voice, says, "Excuse me, we're conducting a survey. Do you believe in God?" What do you think you might say? Under those, you might say, no, but under these conditions, I'm willing to change my mind. And that's where you are when you take the first step. Only you can't see it. You can't see the ground coming up. You can't see. When we say that we're powerless over alcohol, we're out there. We are out there. And we need to change our mind about something fundamental. And there was a little kid, and he was brought up by his father, who was a parachute packer. And his father was a terrible drunk. And he had all drunks working for him. And the kid used to go out where they were packing parachutes and watch them, and they're, throwing them together, and they're drinking beer and throwing a beer can in with the parachute, and, just... And so he watched all this and became absolutely convinced that parachutes are unsafe, and he will never jump out of a plane in a parachute. And he gets later on, he's in the Army and all that, and you want to go to jump school? No, I don't want to go to jump school. I don't want anything to do with parachutes. Well, there comes a time, a couple years later, when the plane he's on is shot down, and they're jumping out, and they're handing out parachutes to everybody so they can jump off. And he says, I don't believe in parachutes. They said, well, you really ought to take one and try it. And he says, you don't understand my childhood. You don't understand where I'm coming from. And they're going, we don't care where you're coming from. Take the goddamn parachute. And you're going to die unless you change your mind about that parachute. So he takes a parachute and doesn't believe in it, but what the heck? And he pulls the ripcord, and all of a sudden, he becomes a believer. And so the second step, came to believe in a power greater than ourselves, has to do with changing your mind. That's what it has to do with. It has to do with abandoning all your old ideas about a higher power and changing your mind, coming to believe. So all I have to do to get a beginning on this is to start to have an open mind and just say, all right, maybe there is. And it's almost a humorous situation later on. And when you look in the big book, in the chapter of the agnostic, there's that great section where Bill writes about being in a spot where you have two choices, and you're actually sitting there thinking about the two choices. And I'll read, or I'll quote that in a second, but it's kind of like the story of the kid that's in front of the judge, and he's been arrested for public drunkenness about 15 times, and the judge is getting a lot of pressure to do something about this kid. So he gets him up there, and he says to him, Billy, you've been brought in here one too many times, so here's the deal. It's either a year in jail or one AA meeting. And the kid is standing there thinking about this. And he's shuffling on one foot, and he's shuffling on the other foot, and the people in the courtroom are going, hello? What is he doing? A year in jail or one AA meeting? And in order to understand, we got to get inside the kid's head. And the kid is a bar drinker. And in the bars, people get arrested. And once in a while, somebody goes to AA. So he had this experience, and some of his drinking buddies would get arrested, and some, very few, but once in a while, somebody would go to AA. And the difference was the guys that got arrested came back. And the guys that went to AA, he never saw again. So one AA meeting was like, whoa, where do you go when you go to AA? I'll never be seen again. And so we're debating this, and in the 12 and 12, or in the big book, it says, here's the two choices. To be doomed to die an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not easy alternatives to face. So suddenly, as you come to door 2, to the second step, you got these two doors because you're powerless over alcohol. Door 1, die alcoholic death. Door 2, live on a spiritual basis. And we're going, whoa. Talk about two crappy choices. Yeah. Whoa. Some of us call the family doc. Hey, Doc, a friend of mine is curious. How bad is the alcoholic death? And we're just trying to check it out because that may be the door we choose. Because we know that living on a spiritual basis is going to be awful. Awful. It's just got to be awful. Because in order to live on a spiritual basis, we have to do a lot of changing. We have to change our mind about a million things. You realize the implications of coming to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to standing? You're going to have to change. You've been wrong about a lot of things if you're going to be changing your mind. There's a higher power going to straighten your life out. You're going to have to eat a lot of crow. You're going to have to go back there. What are you doing, Mr. Macho? Carrying a Bible around? Whoa, 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 whoa. And, so we're in a position here that a fellow in history found himself in. And this was back in 1492. And there was a guy in Europe, a businessman, who, through a series of wonderful business opportunities, had cornered the market on maps of the world. There was nowhere else that anybody could buy a map of the world except from his warehouses around Europe, and he was about to jack the price up sky high when a guy came back from visiting a place on the other side of the ocean with the story that the earth was round. And if this story was true, he's out of business. And so he did not want it to be true that the earth was round. And we don't want it. Our ego does not want it to be true that God exists, that a personal God exists for us. Because we've been the center of the universe all our lives. We're self-centered people. And we're going to get kicked right out of the center of the universe, and God's going to become the center. And our ego's just going, look, let's let God into our life once in a while. Let's let God help us out once in a while. But we can't make him the center of the universe. I mean, God, you never know what he's going to want you to do. He might want you to give all your shit to the poor. He might... You got to go easy with this stuff. You got to go easy. Easy. Let's just get, say a prayer once a month. But we got to stay in charge. We can't just, God's now the center of the universe. So this becomes a threatening thing. It's, even when you are thinking you might want to do it, there's part of you that is just going, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And so it is a struggle, and it's a process. But as we go to meetings and we look at other people and we hear them say, I was right where you are, and I just kept coming here, and I just kept trying to have an open mind, and finally I was able to come to believe that something. That was my other thing. I'm getting a little bit ahead, but I would tell my sponsor, well, what is this God? What am I, I see I'm going to end up turning my life over. What is this? What is this? And he said, you could turn your life over to whatever will take it. And you'll be far better off than where you are now. And so there was no definition. There was no, AA has no explanation of what this power is. It's a personal power. And the Big Book tells us where this power is. It's right inside of us, and it's been there all along. Much like the idea of a friend has been there all along. And what the steps enable us to do, once we come to believe and make this decision, is to open up this channel to this power that's inside of us, so that we can have this wonderful contact, and this power flows out from us. It doesn't flow into us, it flows out from us. It's already there. You already have this package. You already have everything you'll ever need. It's already there. It's just a question of coming to believe that it's there, and a willingness to rely on this, and to go through the process of getting in touch with this wonderful higher power. So if you're struggling on this great sense of coming to believe, hang in there. This is the journey of a lifetime. This is the big leagues. This spiritual journey is way beyond anything you've ever done before. This is going to the mountaintop. You don't just get sober. You go way beyond all that. That's just in the beginning. And it's a life-transforming experience. And don't miss it. You can't believe what a wonderful person you are. You don't even know the magnificence of your own self, if you're new, until you allow this transformation to take place. So best of luck with it. We're exactly at the end of the time. Let's somehow form a circle, and we'll say the Lord's Prayer and wrap it up.